Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We are delighted to see everybody here. We can see some of you are still coming in the room, so please come along and join in and say hello. And we're going to get started on time this afternoon, this evening, and this morning from wherever you are. I'm Lucy. I'll be hosting the webinar, and let me introduce our wonderful speakers for today. So we have Elena Arias-Ortiz from the InterAmerican Development Bank. Eleanor is a senior education specialist and has been deeply involved in both of the studies that we're sharing about Latin America, education technology and higher education. Maria is our co-CEO at HolonIQ, and both Eleanor and Maria will be sharing their insights on this really interesting study that's been going on in Latin America and the Caribbean, and sharing some conversation and commentary on that report as well. In fact, before we move on to that, just a little bit of housekeeping for those of you coming in. So if you haven't used this webinar platform before, you'll find the chat on the right-hand side. It will probably get quite busy, so please feel free to ignore that if you'd rather just listen. In that chat window, you'll see a little bell if you don't want to hear that pinging every time somebody asks a question or makes a comment. Then you can just click that and it'll take that sound off. I can see already someone's asked the important question, will this be recorded? Absolutely, yes, we will record this and it will go straight into your inbox straight after the session, so you can rewatch, capture bits you missed, and so on. Okay, so we'll also have a few polls and opportunities to take part, so we look forward to hearing your perspectives on what's being shown today as well. For those of you who may be less familiar with HolonIQ, we are an impact intelligence platform, and we work absolutely in education, but also across the impact sectors of health and climate. We have a global team based all over the place, but particularly hubs in New York and London and Sydney. And we're actually coming from 3 continents, just even your speakers today, which is quite exciting. Our customers are working across all kinds of areas. You'll see just even from the logos there, some really great companies, people who are innovating in this area. They're in the impact sector, they're in academia, finance, technology, and working across some really important areas for the future of education in particular. And where we are now, this is our early 2022 digital transformation series, and we're already on webinar 4 of 5. So we've been through looking at digital transformation, getting a sense check for where we are now globally. We've looked at the size and the shape of international education. We looked a week or 2 ago at the future of OPMs and the partnership market. Today we're going deep into Latin America, and I can see from your hellos already we have absolutely the right audience here. And then in a couple of weeks we wrap the series talking about new credentials and micro-credentials and where they may be heading next. So our agenda for today is busy as always. We're going to share a little bit of background on this study, where and how and why it happened. And then I will pass across to Eleanor, who will talk about higher education and give us a bit more context about the Latin America and Caribbean region. And then we'll talk through some of the real highlights of the study about digital transformation, digital capabilities, and where this could be going in future for the region. So just very briefly, if you're not familiar with what this study is, you haven't managed to look at the report yet, it's about digital transformation in higher education in the region, where it's at the moment and where it could be going. So this is to complement what's out there already, but give a real on-the-ground view of some of these key issues. So we were talking to higher education institutions, trying to get behind the numbers and understand what's the impact of COVID-19, for example. What are people really doing that we might not know about within universities and higher education institutions, to take a bit of a temperature check for where things are now. We want this report and this study to contribute to the global picture of what's happening strategically in higher education and really situate Latin America and the Caribbean within that. And importantly, it comes also with a companion report. So you may have found that one already. That's a report specifically on education technology in the region, looking at the ecosystem, who's doing what, what's happening. And that's a really fascinating piece of research as well. Just to give you a little bit of sense for what's gone into some of the highlights that you'll hear today. We have been working with input from more than 100 institutions across 14 countries in the region, and drawing on, I said there was lots of data already in this space, so making sure that we're aware of the public research and the data in this space from both government and non-government organizations, surveys with stakeholders directly, in-depth interviews, which is where you'll see some great quotes and some real richness in understanding what's happening in this region. And some proprietary data, of course, from the HolonIQ platform, thousands and thousands of market developments relating to higher education and workforce training, and understanding what's happening through those as well. So just even running your eye at those, at the sample there, we had a great spread of institutions from very small to very large. A lot of people who were delivering primarily face-to-face before COVID and have been developing things since then. Institutions, majority public, majority private, some public, and then countries, of course, some of the larger countries in the region represented, but a really long tail of countries across the region. I think we managed to capture a lot of detail from those. Okay, so I'm going to pass across to Elena from the InterAmerican Development Bank, who is going to take us through some of the broader context in the region and help us understand where this study fits into what's happening more generally.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. You hear me? Yes? Okay. So thank you so much. First of all, I'm really excited to finally share with everyone the findings for this report that we developed together with HolonIQ, myself from the Inter-American Development Bank, but I'm also in representation of my colleagues from the IDB Lab, which is the innovation branch of the bank that works with the private sector. And we joined forces, these three institutions, to kind of identify these the innovations and where is the higher education sector looking at in the region in the future. But for those that are here with us today and that maybe are not familiar with exactly what is the recent trends and challenges for higher education in our region, I'm going to give a brief overview of that, but also stress that for the IDB group, so this public part that I mentioned, and for the IDB Lab, for the whole IDB as an institution, this is a central topic, what it relates to innovation and digital transformation as a cross-cutting issue that guides our approach to skill development, recovery, and economic growth for the region. And all this is very well developed in what we call our Vision 2025, Reinvesting the Americas, or how that offers solution on how our region can face the daunting task of recovering from the worst socioeconomic crisis that we have faced in more than a century. And in this vision, one of the areas that we prioritize for economic development and recovery of the economy is precisely digital transformation, investing in training and the skills of people in our region as an essential building block for this recovery. So we are very excited to share with this report with you today. So in terms of context, I'm gonna be very brief. I'm gonna say, for you to retain is easy, 3 great achievements, I will say, over the last 2 decades that we have reached. First of all, the image that you see here, it's a graph comparing the evolution in the enrollment rate in higher education. And you see that in this time period, over the last 20 years, this gross enrollment rate doubled. It's one of the fastest high growth rates in all regions across the world that were observed during this period. The second fact that is, of course, correlated with this big jump in enrollment is the fact that public investment, over this period, public investment in higher education also increased and reached 1% of GDP in 2018. And this is important, not only, so it increased on not only investment as a part of the economy, but it increased also as part of the overall public spending that is made on education. And it reached almost 20% of overall public investment in education. And the third fact that went with that is a incredible diversification in the supply of higher education, both creation of public universities, but also private universities. The supply just grew exponentially, and we reached since the early 2,300 new institutions were created, and over 3,000 new programs have been created. And as of today, and this is kind of related to what Lucy was saying in terms of the sample, in some countries like Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, and Peru, the private sector in higher education represents between 2/3 and 3/4 of overall investment in higher education. So it's not surprising that when we reach out to what is, like Lucy said, to collect the view on the ground, there is a larger part, or a bit, in some countries, a large part that is coming from private sector institutions. Now, these are the good things that have been happening. There are also areas of improvement or challenges that the region is facing. First, when we look more carefully at access, it's true that we have increased tremendously in terms of enrollment rate, but overall, the enrollment rate is still low with OECD countries or with more developed countries where gross enrollment rate reached 75% in 2019, and we're still at lower levels around 45%. And in addition, what is more worrisome is not shown here, but you can see that in the report that we will be sharing the link in the chat, you can access it already, is that on average, 14% of university degrees awarded in Latin America are in STEM careers. We also have low demand for STEM careers when in countries that are more developed, this is almost reaching 20%. So these are part of the challenges that we're facing. Second, there is still little technology adoption in traditional institutions. And at the same time, they are facing more and more fierce competition and disruption in the higher education market from, of course, big actors that were already before, like Coursera or edX. But even now, corporate universities like Amazon or world-class university offering low-cost offers like MIT that you can access from anywhere in the world. Disruption in the boot camps area. Many of you are probably familiar with it. So you have at the same time low technology adoption and this big disruption in the market. Of course, with COVID, there was a big acceleration, and this is some of the findings we see in the report. I'm not going to get ahead. I'm going to not go there yet, but we can expect that this technology adoption in traditional institutions will increase. But then third, a very important remaining challenges is inequality in access. And this is now the image that I want to show you now in this graph. We have the same enrollment rate that we showed you before, but that was the average per country in 2 years. Now we go and zoom in and we compare the enrollment rate, not only the average, but the highest income quintile with the lowest low income quintile, sorry, that is the green and the orange on the bottom. And what we see is that although there was an increase in enrollment, unfortunately, this benefited mostly income quintiles that are above the average, that are 3, 4, and 5th income. And those that are really at the bottom of the income distribution have very limited progress in terms of access to post-secondary education that we know is key to access better work and labor opportunities. In addition to these facts that I described on the higher education market, this can be paired with difficulties that also the labor market we are facing in the labor market, because even students with post-secondary degrees are sometimes find themselves in underemployed or employed areas that are different from what they study, because there tends to be a mismatch in what the labor market is demanding, the skills, the employers that the skills are demanding, and what actually the higher education system is producing. This is low adjustments to these changing demands. And this, of course, creates difficulties for the individual, but also for the economy in terms of growth and productivity. And just to show you, this is the last graph, the last data. I like data, so this is the last piece. We see that Latin America and the Caribbean again faces like lags compared to other regions in the world. Just to take, there are many indicators and facts you can take around this, but if you look at the global competitiveness and talent index that actually measures the ability of countries to grow, attract, and retain talent, the region is below Europe, North America, and Asia in all the dimensions that are evaluated, and only timidly surpasses, you can see Africa in the dimension of human capital dimension. And one that is as highlighted, as critical, like global knowledge, skills, innovation, leadership. This is the areas in which the dimension in which the greatest lags are observed for the region. So I'm going to stop here. This is a long list of challenges. How can we help really we went into dive into this report saying, okay, why can we identify, what innovations can we highlight that can help education systems in Latin America navigate these challenges and enter the fourth industrial revolution with better tools to respond to these challenges. But first,
it's time to hear from the audience. Thank you, Elena. I mean, it's such an articulate laying out of where we are at the moment. But if we were to simplify, you heard about at least these 4 themes and more: enabling and widening student access, improving student outcomes, digital adoption and transformation, and responding to workforce needs. And just in a moment, you'll see a poll appear underneath the chat in the polls. You'll see a little red dot. And we would like you to choose one of these from your perspective. Which one is the most important challenge for higher education to address in the Latin America and Caribbean region? Give it a few more moments for you to put your answers in. Please do take part. Everybody has an opinion here, and we want to hear them all. Okay, so just rising to the top, we've got student access and digital adoption starting to rise a little bit higher than workforce needs, although there's still a good 22% of you saying workforce needs. Student outcomes down at the bottom at 13%. Okay, so student access is sitting at 35%, and that's absolutely reflective of, I think, a lot of the trends and broader views that we're seeing on this. And what Maria will go through is a little bit more detail on what's happening in these spaces and start to touch on what we could be thinking about to start addressing some of these challenges. So over to you, Maria.
Thanks, Lucy. And Elena, thank you so much for that fantastic overview. It really sets the scene. A lot of challenges, but challenges are also opportunities. And so we see some of both of these things happening through the project and in the report. So overall, if we had to summarize the whole thing, in Latin America and the Caribbean, higher education institutions are absolutely reevaluating how learning is designed and delivered. Now, this is also happening around the world. But as it goes with digital transformation everywhere, it's all about people, actually. And so the biggest challenges are internal change. And some institutions are completely rethinking the whole role of higher education and what they're even there for. And, COVID has spurred in many industries and many parts of the world a really big rethink of the purpose of things. And so we see some of that coming through in this report. So overall, institutions in the region are optimistic, a really wonderful optimism about what they can do and how they can change and how they can have an impact, but fully aware of the challenges. It's very difficult. Digital transformation is hard. They all pretty much agree that higher education in the region won't return to pre-pandemic norms. Things have changed forever are some of the comments we got. Advances of accelerated innovation though, are not distributed evenly. And so we hear this from Elena, from what you're saying in terms of equity of access. Institutions and universities are worried about this because that's part of their mission, of course. Digital transformation is, I cite it as super important. The student experience, focusing on that student experience is key, but generally institutions seem to be focusing on that within their traditional frameworks. Some are thinking completely outside that box, but most are still in that traditional framework. And institutional change is the biggest challenge to digital transformation. There is increasing awareness of the pressure for employability, skills and needs and so on as a core component. So they're the sort of the overall sort of thematics. Now, when we asked these nearly 100 institutions and many interviewees about the biggest challenges facing their institution right now, they could choose multiple answers, but you can see here from the chart, digital adoption and transformation completely front of mind, and very close behind is student retention. Students had a really hard time through COVID, whether it be at school or university. It was super difficult, lots and lots of dropout, a lot of learning loss and a lot of student dropouts everywhere in the world. And this was a great concern and a big challenge for institutions. And access following after that. So these sort of, and low student enrollments, these things are all related, of course, but they were the sort of biggest challenges that were identified. Moving forward to, we asked the institutions to rank the importance of digital for the future of their institution, noting that many institutions were really not digital at all and not offering much online pre-COVID. But this has become very, very high in the importance for all institutions. So 76% of very high importance to the future of the institution. This is not just peripheral. This is to the whole core of the future, and 15% high importance. So almost all institutions were saying, you know what, digital is absolutely critical to our future, to our institution's future. And then when we ask them about, okay, what about your digital maturity right now? Is there a gap here? And there is a gap. I think I'm impressed by 46%, nearly half of respondents talking about these institutions saying they feel like they're quite mature in digital capabilities, where 30% are medium, and then there's some very high, and that's a high proportion, higher than I would have thought. And so what we're seeing here is some digital capabilities that are sitting with institutions pre-COVID, during COVID, and after COVID, I guess, but not necessarily yet being used to their full potential. And so we're looking forward to seeing some of that going forward. Some of when we sort of put this digital maturity and digital importance of digital on a matrix like this, what we saw was different groupings. And so importance of digital to their institution across the bottom, and then vertically the digital maturity. And the two darker squares there are, a group which we call digital leaders. These are institutions which rank themselves as mature in digital, and it's important to them. And the must transformers are those that rank themselves low in digital maturity, but it's a really important thing for us. And so what we even see in this is the opportunity for digital leaders and must transformers to connect with each other and build networks to support the development of digital, because there's lots of similar issues, of course, and so building networks and supports internally between institutions in the region is one of the things that could really work for taking all institutions up in terms of the digital curve. But I'm interested in what you're thinking about what are the top barriers to improving digital in online learning at your institution, and then we're going to reveal what the universities in the region thought. So what are the top barriers? And I think that poll is opening now. Is it culture and change management, budgets and funding, technical infrastructure, teacher capability, regulation, appropriate solutions? What do you think is the sort of the top barrier for digital, for online learning at least, in your institution. And if you submit the vote, you can see all the votes. Culture and change management is up there at a third already, along with teacher capability and training, followed by budget and funding, and then technology and regulation. And it is so true that digital transformation has, technology is not front and center usually. The people and the culture and change management is often the greatest challenge, and we see this in the poll right now. And let's jump into the results from the institutions, and what we see is teacher capability and training being high up there, followed by culture and change management. And so there's transformations to be done, people transformations essentially, and capability building. And so supporting academics, supporting learning design, all those things, and integrating that with technology is the key focus for most institutions in the region in terms of their digital transformation. And so moving forward to this is the sort of key findings, but we were also interested in understanding where institutions in the region were thinking about their sort of future visions. Before I jump into that though, let me just jump back into, I want to ask Elena, I want to ask your opinions on some of these gaps and digital, and what you're seeing, or what, linking with your overall context that you were providing earlier. What's running through your head when I was talking about this sort of importance of digital maturity, focus on supporting academic staff and digital training and upskilling? What are your thoughts on that?
Many things were running through my head. I will set on two comments. The one that I saw, because I had it in my notes already, and I saw someone raising the question about the gaps in access to technology and connectivity and internet. Both from the side of the institutions, but also from the side of the students. And more, if you think about expanding access to online or virtual or hybrid learning, you need connectivity and devices. And this was, I will say, a major challenge that we knew was there, but that became super visible with the pandemic, and is right now high in the agenda of institutions, but also policymakers. Because without this, all this discussion, and you can develop the content, but if people cannot access, and you don't really give connectivity in particular, like as a basic now service, as a right, then many of these strategies might be in jeopardy or limited, and only benefit a part of the population. So that's one important thought. And I was surprised of seeing infrastructure in that sense low in the ranking of challenges for the institutions, because this is important. The technical infrastructure, in a way, is also it's not a basic, is not a sufficient condition to have digital transformation, but it is a necessary conditions for many of these programs or innovations. And then the second thing about teacher capability and training, this is a key issue that we're seeing from the side of the InterAmerican Development Bank, from I would say from primary all the way to higher secondary and even beyond, because we know teachers is the most important input for learning and for the quality and for of learning, for development competencies. So arming them with the capabilities to include technology, but to have good pedagogy, good teaching practices, is the main driver in the end of change. And so we are investing in teacher training, in developing teacher digital skills, having a diagnostic of where are they now, because we talk about this teacher capability, but first we need to measure, again, coming back with my data bias, but we need to know where they are now, what needs do they have, and then monitor if that training is having a real impact into building their capacity and empowering them in the classroom. So I in that respect, I will highlight those two things that I see as really key.
Yeah, thank you, Elena. It's so true. And many times the digital infrastructure, just access, is sort of taken for granted by an institution, because often institutions are completely networked, but students at home are not necessarily. And again, that goes back to that equity of access issue that you were talking about, that threads also through the concerns from the institutions that we talk to. So moving on to future vision as opportunities, because we're interested in where the region sees possibilities and opportunities out of the challenges that we've highlighted already. And so we asked university leaders and people working in universities about which digital trends did they feel most impacted, would most impact the future success of their institution. And so hybrid learning was really sort of right on top. So institutions are absolutely focused on servicing students' needs and delivering a good digital student experience. That's what they want to do. And so they're focusing on things which are right in front of them now, and over the last couple of years, of course, hybrid learning. They know that just delivering fully on campus with no digital component at all is just not the way forward. And so they're thinking and working on how to build hybrid learning, where it not necessarily all on campus or all online, that sort of hybrid learning, but with digital being a sort of a digital backbone underneath all experiences, even if students are on campus, that there now is a digital component to things. And lots of institutions are interested in thinking about their student learning journey to make it personalized, to make it adaptive, to make it useful for the individual student. These things are not easy to pull off, but these are the trends which they feel are going to impact their institution most, followed then by AI and automation. And I guess personalized and adaptive learning and artificial intelligence is related. Data analytics is important because when, the world is starting to rethink many core parts of learning processes, and that includes how to observe learning. If you can't do it physically because you're not watching and in the room with people, you need to do it through data, tracking what they're doing, how they're going with it, if they're failing things, if they're not submitting things. This is all data. And so data analytics is incredibly important in that infrastructure layer, but it impacts how you can support learners. And so, these sorts of areas are, sort of really top of mind for most institutions, and that links back to what I said in the beginning, which is universities are focused on their core business, as they should be, of course, but there are other competitive activities happening in education. They're not thinking about those sort of other credentialing types or other providers that are coming into, take some of their market, you might call it, but they're not really thinking about that right now. They're focused on supporting their students and building their own digital capabilities. The other thing we wanted to understand from them was what are the top challenges in preparing their students for future employment, because this was a thematic coming out. And so the greatest challenge that institutions have, 50% of them almost, was building relevant job skills inside their curriculum. And so this is an articulation of the gap that exists, not only in this region, but of course in many other regions where university curriculum and teaching and learning keeping up with the changing requirements of the workforce. And, as part of their job to prepare students for the future jobs, future skills. And so building those things into their curriculum was the greatest challenge by far, compared with, job finding and placement and so on, less so. Industry collaboration and partnerships, these things are all related, of course. But there are definitely long established gaps between workforce needs and what higher education institutions currently offer. Institutions are completely aware of it, and there are challenges there. So there's also, as I said, there's opportunities in that area too. Just before I move on, Elena, would you like to make a comment on that? Because you talked about skills, digital skills, or just skills in terms of workforce preparation. Have you got things to comment on related to this type of result?
Yes, and it's linked to another thing that you say, this, and I relate that to that, for example, for micro-credential short programs, on how it's not only, I think traditional institutions have many opportunities on all their traditional offerings right now, and how to integrate and leverage digital transformation, but it also, I think, opens opportunity to rethink also different type of diploma, different type of learning trajectories that are more flexible, that allow students to, because to access more, but to stay also. We have, I didn't talk about that in the context, but we know there are a lot of issues with dropout because students need to work, they have competing demands. And so all this thinking about access, permanence in higher education, and then how to respond quickly to these demands on the labor market. This I see a common solution the region should explore more in detail. And there is a recent World Bank report that highlights this, the short cycle programs that could solve all these issues that you have talked through your findings. So that's the only thing I would like. That's what really in my head is like. This is something that the region and the institutions should explore more carefully.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so when we asked the higher education leaders about sort of visioning for digital futures in higher education, the sort of summary of that, and of course the report goes into much more detail, so we'll put the link in and provide it in a minute, but digital solutions that institutions are concerned about and care about, enabling access and equity. And so digital solutions are needed, yes, but not at the expense of access. Even, I mean, there could be greater opportunities for access through digital, or lesser, depending. So they care about that, and that's wonderful. There was a lot of talk about leveraging partnerships, networks, communities, not going alone in these digital transformations. And so that relates to, some of those institutions are, have self-assessed as mature digitally, and it's important to them. Others are saying, we're not so mature, we don't know how to do this. We can learn from our colleagues and our peers. And so within countries and across the region as well. And so building networks, building partnerships, building, communities of practice for digital transformation in higher education is one way, absolutely, of moving things forward faster. And the other area, of course, is designing programs that absolutely align with and evolve with workforce needs. So that's that integration, more close integration with employers, workforce, industry needs, and so on. And finally, building digital capability across the institution. You can't deliver digitally unless you have digital capability. It's just not possible. And so a focus on really building and upskilling capability across the institution. And this links back to leveraging partnerships and working with others and so on. And so that's there were some wonderful thoughts and let's say lots of optimism about how opportunities can be developed out of great challenges over the last couple of years. I'd like to ask the audience back again because when you start thinking about future visions, you start to think, well, this is what we need to get there. What's the key sort of support that your institution would need in order to build digital capability? And so I'm interested in finding out that from the audience. Just jump into the polls there. It's open right now. What do you think would be the most important support to improve digital capability in your institution or maybe in the region? I'm going to submit my vote now. And so what we see here is teacher training and development. Again, that's the same as the barrier we talked about before, budget and funding. digital transformation does cost. It's not cost free, because everyone's got full-time jobs right now, and on top of that, transforming. So budgets are required, and that's coming out sort of second, but by far and away, it's still teacher training and development on that. All of these things are probably needed, but upskilling the team is by far and away the largest issue I can see there. Okay, all right. So I'm going to hand over. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Lucy. Of course, these reports, the higher education digital transformation report, there's a lot more detail in that. It's 20 or 30 pages. It's got a lot more detail from what we've just talked about in the presentation. Handing over to Lucy to take us through that.
Thank you, Maria. And just another thank you. These studies are not done by just 2 or 3 people that you see on a webinar. They're absolutely the work of a village of people across multiple countries. So a really big thank you to everybody from IDB and from IDB Lab, all of the researchers and the analysts and the translators. And when you go to these links that Tanya's just put in the chat, you'll see they're available in Spanish and English, so you don't have to put up with just listening to us in English. You can dive into it and really get deep. There's so much more. This could have been a 5-hour webinar to look into all of the detail in there, and you'll see a bunch of other resources and further reading and those kind of things as well. You'll also note that the companion study here, and in just a few weeks' time, I think on the 11th of April, please look out for a webinar that IDB are hosting to share some of the key highlights from that. And that's going to be a really interesting discussion as well about just what's happening in the EdTech ecosystem in the region, which is, there's amazing amounts of innovation and some really interesting stuff happening. So you are absolutely welcome to engage with that. One of the things that we know really brings digital transformation to life is going into case studies to really understand how one or another institution tackles a particular challenge, pulls a solution together, makes those decisions about who to work with and how to build something or how to buy something in, how projects are actually implemented to make change, and then the impact that those things have. So you'll notice amongst this collection that there's one from Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico, for example, as well as lots around the world. And this is when we talk about learning from peers and networking and becoming part of a global community on this. This is one of the ways that we can do it. And of course, we invite you to share your own. I know some of you have been in touch about case studies. Please remind us if we haven't talked to you yet. If you've been working on something, we would love to hear about it and feature it in a case study. I mentioned a network. If you want to talk more about this, and I'm sure you do, the best way to stay in touch is to be part of this global higher education network. I think we're on close to 3,000 higher education leaders around the world who are joining sessions like these, getting regular updates. And you may have noticed the word global summits in there, which I'll come to in a second. Those of you who are based around, thinking about going to ASU GSB Summit in San Diego, HolonIQ will be there in just a few weeks' time and running a specific networking session for EdTech in Latin America. So keep an eye out for more information on that. We'd love to see you in person. And summits I mentioned. So we will be in Mexico City in about 6 months' time. This is part of an enormous series of summits that we're very excited about. But if you've been missing networking with people, meeting people, engaging in these kind of conversations face to face, there will be opportunities this year, and we would really, really love to see you there. So Tanya, thank you so much for keeping up with all of those links and making sure people can go through and engage with these things. And the last thing from me, very sadly, in a couple of weeks is the last webinar in this current series. And Eleanor and Maria have both talked about these potential new credentials, different ways of engaging in learning, and whether it's happening within universities or in the workforce, and ideally connections between the two. This was our most popular webinar last year, and we're so excited to kind of update and talk about where this is going next and share some case studies in particular in this area. So thank you, Tanya. Last link from you and last slide from me. Thank you so much, Elena and Maria, for your insights. It's been absolutely wonderful to be a small part of this study together with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Lucy. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Look forward to seeing you again. You will get the link to this recording pretty much immediately after the session. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.